This video is on common fractions, in particular the four operations add, subtract, multiply and divide, and also the order of calculation. To prepare for that, first a reminder of equal fractions. I have here a rectangle. If it was split into four equal parts, it's quartered. So there are 4 quarters there. It's in 4 parts. If I was to split it horizontally, it would split into 3 equal parts here. Combining these together, cutting it horizontally into thirds and vertically into quarters, we've got 12 pieces here. So this is 12 pieces, 12 squares making up the rectangle. When we have the quarters here, if I were to shade 3 parts out the 4, I've shaded 3 quarters of the rectangle. So here's the fraction 3 quarters, 3 parts out of 4. So there are 4 parts altogether. Shaded are 3 parts. On the top, the number is referred to as the numerator. On the bottom, the number is referred to as the denominator. If I then split that horizontally, from having 3 parts shaded, it's now got 9 parts shaded out of the 12 parts altogether. So the 3 parts on the top became 9 parts, 3 times bigger, and the number of parts altogether went from being 4 parts to being 12. So the top number was multiplied by 3, and the bottom number was multiplied by 3, and that gave us 9 parts out of 12 shaded. 9 twelfths is shaded. 3 quarters was originally shaded. Simply by dividing it horizontally, we've now made it 9 twelfths is shaded, but it's the same amount that's shaded each time. 3 quarters and 9 twelfths are the same, they are equal. So if I multiply the top number, the numerator, and the bottom number, the denominator, by the same factor, the same number, I produce an equivalent fraction. 9 twelfths is the same as 3 quarters. We'll need that for adding and subtracting fractions. Getting an equal fraction by multiplying the top and the bottom of the fraction by the same number. Also involved will be what we call cancelling down or simplifying. It's working from 9 twelfths back to 3 quarters simply by dividing the top number by 3 and the bottom number by 3. We produce an equivalent fraction. So 9 twelfths has simplified to 3 quarters, and it doesn't simplify any further. Here we simply say the largest number that will go into 9 and also go into 12 is 3. So divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3 and we simplify the fraction. So that's equal fractions. Another reminder here is mixed numbers. Here I've got 3 rectangles, all of them quartered. So there are 12 quarters altogether here. So 12 quarters. That's 4 quarters there shaded. That's now 8 quarters shaded. So that's 2 rectangles gave us 8 quarters. And here I've shaded 3 out of the 4. 3 quarters shaded. So that is 2 whole rectangles and 3 quarters. Mixed number, 2 for the 2 whole rectangles and 3 quarters for this third part here. The third rectangle shaded 3 parts out of 4. So that's mixed number because it's got a whole number part and it's got a fraction part. So it's a mixed number, 2 3 quarters. Well, if I look at it, I've got 4 quarters. I've now got another 4 quarters. That's 8 quarters. And then I've got 3 quarters. So I've got 4, 4 and 3. That's 11 quarters altogether. Showing it here, I've got 2 plus the 3 quarters. The 2 is worth 8 quarters. Plus that other 3 quarters gives us 11 quarters altogether. So 8 quarters and 3 quarters making up 11 quarters. 2 3 quarters is a mixed number. 11 quarters is a fraction. It's an improper fraction, which means the number on the top is bigger than the number on the bottom. So sometimes called top heavy. 2 3 quarters is a mixed number. It can be changed into a top heavy fraction. Correct name for it is an improper fraction. So 2 3 quarters is equal to 11 quarters. We'll use this when it comes to multiplication and division. when mixed numbers become involved, we want to change to these top-heavy fractions. A quick way to get the 11 quarters is this 2 was split into quarters, so that's 8 quarters. It gave 2 times 4 there. Here it is, 4 times 2. So the denominator times the whole number there gives us 8 quarters. This part here, the 8 quarters, or there's the 8 quarters up here in the diagram. And then the extra 3 quarters added on gave us the top number 11. So it's 2 3/4. It's basically how many quarters do you have. 2 is worth 8 quarters, and then plus the 3 quarters makes 11 quarters. So that's changing from a mixed number to a top-heavy fraction. You can work that backwards, of course. So here we have the 11 quarters. That's 4 quarters, that's 8 quarters, and there's 3 quarters left over. And we can see it's 2 whole rectangles and 3 quarters. That would give us a mixed number, 2 3/4. So the 8 quarters, 4 here and 4 here, is worth 2 whole rectangles, and there's 3 quarters here on the third rectangle left over, 2 3/4. So to change between 11 quarters and 2 3/4, you can say, well, how many 4s are in 11? 2 of them. That would make 8 quarters, and if it's 8 quarters and this is 11 quarters, there's 3 quarters left over. So 11, how many quarters are in it? 11 divided by 4, 2 whole rectangles, that's the 8 quarters part, and 3 left over. 2 remainder 3 is that 2 there, and there's the 3 left over. Now it doesn't matter how it's done, but basically you should be able to switch between mixed numbers and top-heavy fractions. There's another illustration here of what we have. Here's 11 quarters, so there's 11 quarters of a cake, if you like. So that's 11 quarters. So here it is here, 11 quarters. And if I bring these together, every 4 pieces coming together makes a whole circle, whole cake. So 8 of them go together, 2 lots of 4, and then there's 3 quarters left over, 2 3/4. So it's the 8 quarters that make up the 2, and there's 3 quarters left over. So that's just necessary for multiplying and dividing fractions. So here's adding them. I can add quarters and quarters together and get more quarters. I can add halves together and get more halves. I can add thirds together with other thirds and get more thirds. As long as the bottom number is the same, they can be added together. So here we've got 3/10, and that's 2/5. I want to get the bottom number to be the same, so I want to get an equivalent fraction. I want to turn 2/5 into a certain number of tenths. To do that, I would double the 5 in the bottom, so I double the 2 in the top. That's 4/10. And now the bottom number is the same, the denominator is the same. So I've got what we call a common denominator. 4/10 and 3/10 gives you 7/10, just like 4 apples and 3 apples gives you 7 apples. So you can add tenths with other tenths. So if the bottom number isn't the same, the denominator isn't the same, they're not ready to add. But to make the bottom numbers the same, to do that you've got to produce equivalent fractions. You would look at the biggest number, here 10, and you think of the 10 times table, and the first number in the 10 times table that 5 divides into is 10 itself. So your common denominator is 10. Here in the next one, denominator 6, denominator 9. The biggest number is 9. Think of your 9 times table. 9 ones are 9, but 6 doesn't go into it. 9 twos are 18. 6 goes into 18 3 times. So that's the common denominator, 18. That's the lowest or the least common multiple of the denominators. So you want a common denominator, it's the lowest or least common multiple. So you look at the biggest number, its multiples is its times table. Both these numbers go into 18. So you think, I want to turn 9 into 18, you need to double the 9. So you double the 2 in the top, 4/18. 6 here, you need to triple it. Multiply it by 3 to get 18. So you multiply the top by 3. So that's 3 6s and 3 5s, 15/18. 2 9s and 2 2s, 4/18. You can now subtract 18ths. 15 18ths, take away 4 18ths is 11 18ths, just like 15 apples, take away 4 apples is 11 apples. So, add, subtract fractions, common denominator. We use equal fractions to rewrite here the 5 6ths into 18ths and the 2 9ths into 18ths. So they've now got a common denominator. If they're mixed numbers, it's really is quite straightforward. That's the same 2 5ths and 3 10ths and 5 6ths and 2 9ths. All I've done is put a number here in blue in front of them. That's 4 and 2 5ths and it's 2 and 3 10ths. You do exactly the same. You add the fractions with a common denominator. 4 tenths plus 3 tenths is 7 tenths. You just add the 4 and the 2 to get 6. So you just add the mixed numbers by adding the fractions, just like you would in the previous slide, with a common denominator, and you just add the whole number part of the mixed number. You just add these separately. So you treat the blue parts, the whole number parts, separately from the fraction part. So here's 7 and 5 6, take away 3 and 2 9ths. The 5 6 take away 2 9ths uses a common denominator, like in the last slide, and you just have 7 minus 3 is 4. So you simply treat the whole number parts separately from the fraction parts. There is a complication to that. Here are 2 cases. So suppose you had 4 and 4 5ths, add 2 and 7 tenths. These fifths can be turned into tenths, 8 tenths. So that's, as with any fraction, you're adding 4 5ths and 7 tenths with a common denominator. And all that happens here is, you're going to add the 4 and the 2 and get 6, the whole number part. You add 8 tenths and 7 tenths, you'll get 15 tenths. And all that's happened is, this is a top-heavy fraction, 15 tenths. 10 tenths makes 1 whole. So you take 10 tenths away from that, give it to the 6. The 6 becomes 7, and there's 5 tenths left over. So that's 10 tenths off the 15 tenths to leave 5 tenths behind. And the 10 tenths makes an extra 1 on the 6. 5 tenths simplifies to 1/2. 5 tenths, top number divide by 5, bottom number divide by 5, it simplifies. Here, in a subtraction, the complication will be, once we get the common denominators, 3 18ths and 16 18ths, we're trying to say 3 minus 16 18ths. Well, we can't take 16 off 3, but what we can do is borrow 18 18ths from this 7. So borrowing 18 18ths makes that 21 18ths and reduces the 7 to a 6. So we've taken 1 off the 7, which is 1 is equivalent to 18 18ths, and given the 18 18ths onto this fraction, so it's 21 18ths. And now you can do 21 18ths minus 16 18ths, which is 5 18ths. Just like 21 apples take away 16 apples is 5 apples. And the 6 take away the 3 in the whole number parts, 3. So the key in add and subtract is treat the whole number parts separate from the fraction parts. The fraction parts require a common denominator. And just these slight complications, you could have an answer at the end that's a top-heavy fraction. And here, you have to change that 3 18ths into 21 18ths by borrowing 1 off the 7. So you can do the subtraction. This is multiply. So here, I have 3/4 of a rectangle shaded, 3 parts out of 4. Split it horizontally into thirds, so it's now in 12ths. And well, if you look at the shaded part, the original shaded part was 3 parts out of 4. Split it horizontally, so I've shaded 2/3. The bit that's cross shaded now, this part in here, that's 2/3 of the original shaded 3/4. So this cross shaded part is the part which is 2/3 of the original 3/4 that I had. So that's 6 parts out of 12 cross shaded here. So 2/3 of 3/4 has to be 6/12. 6 parts here out of the 12 bits altogether. If you look at that, 2/3 of 3/4, 2 in the top, times that 3 makes that 6, and 3 times that 4 makes the 12. In other words, it's the same as a multiplication. Of is a multiplication. 2 times 3, 3 times 4. That's what's happened. 2 times 3, 3 times 4. You multiply the two numerators, you multiply the two denominators. So of means multiply. When you multiply the numerators together, you multiply the denominators together. This gives you 6/12, which is half shaded. But the principle's there, which is if you're multiplying two fractions, here generalises A over B times C over D. You multiply the numerators and you multiply the denominators. And remember, of will mean multiply. Quite frequently it's mistaken for a division. It's not. Of is always multiplied. So 2/3 of 5/7 means 2/3 multiplies 5/7. You simply do 2 times 5 in the top, and you do 3 times 7 in the bottom, and that's it, done. Same principle if you're multiplying three fractions together. On the top line, there's a 2, a 3, and a 5 get multiplied. 2 times 3 times 5. In the bottom, 5 times 4 times 8. So the top line comes out at 30, the bottom line comes out at 160. That will simplify. The top and the bottom can both be divided by 10, so it cancels down, simplifies to 3/16. If an answer simplifies, you always simplify it. So, multiplication is straightforward. Just multiply the top numbers, the numerators, multiply the bottom numbers, the denominators. And if it simplifies after that, simplify it. If it's top heavy, you can go to a mixed number. So that's the basics of multiplying fractions. If it was mixed numbers, 3/10 here of 2 3/4, change the mixed number to a top heavy fraction. Number of means multiply. So that was 4 2's add 3 give you 11 in top. 2 3/4 is equivalent to 11/4. And now you just do 3 times 11 and 10 times 4. And that's it, done. Both these are mixed numbers. Change them to be top heavy. So this is 1 2/3. Remember the 1's equivalent to 3/3. So together with that 2/3 it makes 5/3. 3 in terms of fifths, that's equivalent to 15/5. Plus that 1/5 makes it 16/5. Or you can do 5 3's add 1 for the top number. 3 1's add the 2. And now you can either simply say 5 times 16 over 3 times 5, as I'll do. Spot that 80 and 15 both divide by 5. And it'll give you 16 over 3. That's top heavy. Change it back to a mixed number. 15/3 is 5. And there's an extra third left over. Or 3 into 16 is 5 remainder 1. There's the 5 and there's the 1 remainder. What you could do, you could cancel earlier, you can cancel that 5 here with the 5 in the top, and it would become 16 over 3 in the next line. So you can simplify earlier. But if you've got mixed numbers, change them into top heavy fractions, and then you can multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. So that's multiplication. If it's mixed numbers, go top heavy. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Divide. Suppose you had 2/5 divided by 3/4. I can write that fraction division as a big fraction. 2/5 all over 3/4, because that's 2/5 divided by 3/4. If I multiply the top and bottom by 4/3, this 3/4 is on the bottom. If I flip it upside down, it's called the reciprocal. 4/3. When you multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, that's the fraction flipped upside down, you get them to cancel down to 1. This is 12 over 12, which is 1. So 3/4 times 4/3, a number times its own reciprocal, will give you 1. And that becomes, the top line, 2/5 times 4/3, all over 1. Well, if it's all over 1, it's just 2/5 times 4/3. And notice what's happened. Division by 3/4 has become multiplication by its reciprocal, the fraction flipped upside down, 4/3. So you change division into multiplication by the reciprocal. The second fraction is the one that flipped upside down, the other one stayed as 2/5. So that's the rules for division. If you're dividing by a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal, the fraction flipped upside down. And after that, it's just multiplication. 5/6 divided by 3/7, change it to multiplying by 7/3. And then you do what you did before, 5 sevens in the top, 6 threes in the bottom. Don't cancel down at the division stage. You can cancel down at the multiplication stage. If you have a mixed number, first go top heavy. So 1 and 5 sevens is 12 sevens, and 4 I'm writing is 4/1. Division by 4/1 becomes multiplying by a quarter, the reciprocal of 4/1. Notice the first fraction remains unchanged, and then it's 12 ones over 7 times 4, and that will simplify because top and bottom both divide by 4. So division changes to multiplication by the fraction flipped upside down. The other fraction stays as it is. And if you get mixed numbers, go top heavy first, then change the division to multiplication by the reciprocal. So that's the 4 operations: add, subtract, multiply, divide. A reminder that if you're carrying out calculations, you always do multiplication and division first before you do addition or subtraction, unless there's brackets. So when this is 6 plus 4 times 3, you do the 4 threes first, and then you do the addition. Here, you do the brackets first. You do the 6 plus 4 because it's in brackets, and then 10 threes. Here, 6 times 3, take away 12, divide by 3. You do the multiplication and division first, then you do the subtraction. So multiply and divide before you add or subtract. If there's brackets there, do them first. 6 times 3 minus 12, that's 18, take away 12 is 6, and then do the division by 3. So brackets first. And the same with fractions. So this is the order of calculation. You would do the 2/9 times 3/4 first. So you would separate that off. 2 threes, 4 nines, 6/36. That simplifies. Top and bottom both divide by 6. It's 1/6. And now you do 5/8 minus that 1/6. You think of your 8 times table. 8 ones are 8, 8 twos are 16, 8 threes are 24. And that's the first number, 6 goes into 24. So you want denominator 24. 3 8s, 3 5s, 4 6s, 4 1s. So that was 3 times the 8, so it's 3 times the 5 on top. That was 4 times the 6 in the bottom, so you want 4 times 1 in the top. And now it's 15 24s, take away 4 24ths, which is 11 24ths. So the multiplication was done first, and then the subtraction. Here, the division doesn't go first because there's brackets. You always do brackets first. 5/6 minus a half. 6 times table, 6 ones are 6. Well, 2 goes into 6, so you go to sixths. So that's still 5/6, and that becomes 3/6. 3 times 2 in the bottom, so 3 times 1 in the top. 5/6 minus 3/6 is 2/6, and 2/6 will simplify to 1/3. You can divide top and bottom by 2. And now, it's 1/3 divided by 1 3/4. A division. Go top heavy first to get rid of the mixed number here. So change 1 3/4 to 7/4. Still a division. Now you've got 2 fractions here. Change the division to multiplication by the reciprocal. So the 7/4 is flipped upside down to be 4/7. And then it's 1 times 4 on the top and 3 times 7 on the bottom. So there's the answer. So that's the order of calculation. Multiply and divide first unless there's brackets. There's a worksheet. This is mixed, add, subtract, and multiply, divide, and it's all given some context. If you click the link in the description, you can get access to that worksheet. It will have answers with it. There's also a worksheet here which is had decimals on it. There's a separate video on the decimals in order of calculation, but there's addition of fractions and subtraction. There's multiplication of fractions and division. Then there's order of calculation here, mixed, add, subtract, multiply, divide in brackets. And it's got the answers. So there's that worksheet. The one I mentioned, this one with the in context fraction questions. They're not difficult fractions, they're just in a context, and it's got answers with them. And using the same link in the description, there's a set of notes. It covers all previous videos on number, which was decimals and scientific notation and so on. And it's got on it fractions as well. And for later, percentages and directed numbers, positive and negative numbers. So a set of notes that covers fractions, 2 worksheets if you click the link in the description. Hope you found the video useful.